This is the next lesson in Paper 3 Germany for GCSE History. Now this lesson is going to focus on another challenge that the Weimar faced in the year 1923. And this challenge was the occupation of the Ruhr and hyperinflation. This is a very popular exam topic because it really defines the challenges that the new government went through in this period. And the point of this lesson is to be able to look at why the occupation of the Ruhr occurred, and then the effects and consequences that hyperinflation brought upon Germany in 1923, which once again caused significant issues for the government. Now, just as a little starter, finish the sentences here. If you are in school or aren't in school, this is a good little recap from the lesson before on the Spartacist uprising and the Cat Putsch. So, the leaders of the Spartacist uprising wanted the blank in control. The Cat Putsch wanted a blank. The leaders of the Cat Putsch were angry because the army was reduced to blank men. Think about the Treaty of Versailles there. The Spartacists were put down by the blank. The Cat Putsch was put down by the blank. Both uprisings focused on blank. Using the Freikorps showed that the Weimar was blank. And the government blank away to blank when Kapp and Luttwitz invaded. What you've got there are just some really good overview sentences to be able to help you recall the last lesson that we did. So, the first part of today's lesson is looking at stage 1, the actual occupation of the Ruhr. Now, the occupation of the Ruhr, firstly, the Ruhr is an area in Germany which produced many resources, many raw materials, many manufactured goods, and had lots of coal and steel. This was an area that Germany were able to keep hold of during after the punishment of the Treaty of Versailles. However, a lot of the goods that Germany made in the Ruhr helped them pay the Treaty of Versailles. So in December 22, Germany failed to send coal to France from the Ruhr coalfield, so Germany effectively missed a reparations payment by failing to send coal to France. They had to do this because of the agreement, so Germany had to pay a set amount every year. It worked out around 250 million every year, and this amount could be paid in money and items. Now, the Ruhr was vitally important to Germany because it provided coal, and it had a lot of manufactured goods, and it had a lot of raw materials that could be used to pay this reparations payment. But the agreement was, or the idea was, if Germany missed one of these payments, they would be invaded. So due to Germany missing a payment in December 22, in January 23, France and Belgium sent troops to the Ruhr coalfields. They confiscated raw materials, manufactured goods and machinery, and effectively took over the Ruhr. Now, as a result of this, the Weimar Republic, the president, said that all workers should go on passive resistance, which is a strike to resist the French and Belgians. Now, this was a problem because if the government told workers to go on strike, the workers still need to be paid, but there's no money coming into the area. So as a result, this was a problem because no money was coming into Germany. Now, while the French and Belgians were in the Ruhr, they treated the workers incredibly poorly, using violence, arresting them, and made around 100,000 of them homeless. And to keep up with the demands of paying workers, the German government had to print more money to keep up with paying the workers. This was because no money was coming into Germany. Now, the problem with this is that the more money that is printed, the more prices go up, and it's going to be a vicious cycle. And it got to the point where Germany went through something called hyperinflation, which meant that money became worthless. Now, what you need to do is look at these 6 questions. If you've done these already, that's great, and answer them in full sentences using this information on the PowerPoint. Pause the video here, and when you've done them, move on to the next stage of hyperinflation. Right, okay, the next stage then. We're going to be looking at the actual impact of hyperinflation. Now, this is just a good overview here of the impact and the value of money going down. On one side, you've got the exchange rate in Germany, so how many marks you could get for a pound. This showed that the monetary value of money became worthless and that the actual concept of money spiraled out of control. On the other side, you've also got the price of bread, which shows that in 1919 it just cost 1 mark for a loaf of bread. At the end of 1922 it was 100, and by the 1923 it was 200,000 billion marks. Now, what we need to understand here is that for some people this would have been catastrophic. If you were a pensioner, for example, who was getting a set amount of money every month, you weren't going to be able to afford to eat. This is going to cause significant problems in the long run for people who may lose their savings, people who might not have enough money due to their pension, and people that don't have any goods to trade for items. Now, the next task you need to do is to be able to build up a bank of knowledge from hyperinflation. So I'm going to put a range of sources on the PowerPoint, and for each one you need to write what you learn about hyperinflation from this source. Then once we've done that, we're going to look at a range of people, and you need to decide if they are winners of hyperinflation, losers of hyperinflation, or a bit of both. So these are the first sources. I'll read 2 of them out, and then I'll let you pause the video and make a list of what you learn. So source A says a woman's husband died and she was left with 4 children. She was given 4 months of her dead husband's salary. The papers were sent off, checked, and sent back to the woman. By the time all the paperwork was done, the woman had got the money. The money could only afford to pay for 3 boxes of matches. 4 months of someone's salary. By the time the paperwork had gone through, the value of that person's salary was worthless. Families were starving. Children were suffering. Inheritance meant nothing during hyperinflation because money became worthless. If that person had left, let's say, 4,000 marks to the family, by 1923 they would not even come close to buying a loaf of bread. Source B. My father sold his business during the war, together with all the property he owned, and he retired. He was a middle-class man who was well off and intended to live off the money he made by selling property. All the money he earned depreciated, which means lost value, due to hyperinflation, and he had to go back to work to survive. Elderly people were forced back into work. Retired people were forced back into work. People with savings lost everything. This caused a lot of anger towards the Weimar government and made a lot of them turn to extreme parties during this time. So, pause the video here, go through source C and source D, and then I'm going to put the next slide of sources up and work through those and make a list of what you can learn about hyperinflation from these sources. And this is source E, F, G and H. Particularly want to point out source G, the story of 2 women carrying a laundry basket of money. They stopped at a crowded shop window, put the baskets down. When they turned around, the money was left, but the baskets were gone. Items were more important than money, because Germany became a nation of bartering, of trading, of swapping. And the only thing you didn't swap was money, because money was literally worthless. So the winners and losers of hyperinflation, we just need to go through and decide what are they at this stage. Now, we've got a range of groups here. Unemployed people, landowners, business owners, working class people, pensioners, a debtor, a farm owner, a foreigner, and the government. You need to go through these and decide if they are winners, losers, or both. I'm going to go through a couple, and then you can make that decision for the rest of them. So the first one, unemployed people. I have no savings. I received benefits from the government. Prices rose and I was poor, but my benefits also rose. Not as much as prices, but I wasn't really so bad off. I've lost my job. There are many people like me. Normal business and trading has stopped. How will I get another job? The only positive for the unemployed person was they were receiving benefits still. But the benefits weren't as high as the prices. So even though unemployed people were getting something, they were still living in poverty. And the clear thing is there weren't many jobs at this time because there were lots of factories closing, there were lots of people shutting their businesses down. Therefore jobs and unemployment especially rose, and jobs were very limited. A debtor, someone who owes money. I always said enjoy life, eat, drink and be merry. My family have disowned me, I was in all sorts of debt. But thank heaven for inflation, who'd have thought it, I'm saved. If you think about it, if this person had 100,000 marks of debt, yet the government are printing notes worth 50 billion marks, this person is going to be able to pay their debt off at a fraction of the cost, which means after hyperinflation they are going to be out of trouble. And one that people tend to misunderstand is a foreigner. I feel like I've won the lottery. The exchange rate is so good here, then I get millions of marks for only a small amount of money. If you were from England and you went to Germany and exchanged £10, you would be getting quite a vast amount of money by November 1923. So people went to Germany, foreigners went to Germany and benefited from the fact that they had money to be able to support themselves, but also take advantage of the situation. Now, that's a breakdown of the winners and losers. That's all you need to know for this lesson. Now what we are going to do in the next lesson is look at this in a bit more detail, and I'm going to do a very quick 5-minute exam video on this question.